Bruce Wayne with another one of my amazing stories. So the last time that we, interacted there, on the last show, I was explaining how we won that. We were breakdancing and we were clubbing, and while we were breakdancing specifically, we won that radio, that radio with the 3 cassette tape players in them, and so we were really excited about that. And of course, in the last episode, I said that we decided that each person would have the radio for about 2 weeks, and so this was at this particular point, like I said, the breakdancing was winding down a bit. And I actually remember one day, I was never good at like popping like that. That was just not my thing. I was not that coordinated that way. But I remember one day, that one of the kids said to me, he says, I was trying to pop, and he goes, "That's not popping." He says, "You're just flexing your muscles." And that was the first time I realized I got muscles? I didn't know I had muscles. So at that point, I looked over and people were working out in the gym, and I decided, well, maybe I should go in there and see what this working out thing is all about. And so right there at the West End House Boys Club, they had one room that was in there. And it was a very, very small room, almost not much bigger than a large closet. It had a squat rack in there, it had a bench in there, it had a lat pull down, and it had some dumbbells. And pretty much that was it. There might have been another machine, but maybe a back extension machine. But there wasn't much in there. But that's all we needed. And so I started, as I'm fading away from breakdancing, I started to work out in the gym. But let me just go back a little bit. Excuse me there. So let me go back a little bit. So when on the other side, when I was in high school at the time, through the freshman, sophomore year, etc., we sort of, that's when I breakdanced. And so at some point, I was getting pretty good grades. And school was pretty exciting to me. I'd go to class, I'd interact with the teachers. But at some point, I actually started to get into student leadership. And so at the time, there was not a student council there. And there was this woman by the name of, I'll give her name out because she's a hero of mine. Her name is Patty DeRosa. And Patty DeRosa was one of the adults who taught student leadership in our school. And so she would work with all the students to try to develop young leaders. And for whatever reason, I guess I ended up in her circle, and she started to coach me and coach some of the other kids. And we formed the student council, and I became president of the student council. And so, it's not a lot of kids were interested in this kind of nerdy thing because it was outside of the cool zone, because the cool is fashion, it's popular, but student leadership was something that was very interesting to me, to be able to influence other people and to make changes in the school. And I remember eventually I was actually appointed or chosen, selected, whatever, to be a part of the Boston Student Advisory Club, I think it was called, or organization. And that was a big deal because this organization was responsible for helping to develop student leaders throughout the city of Boston. And so, along that way, we sort of resurrected the student council, and I started to participate in that. And I think on the outside, the West End House Boys Club also, for a very, very short period of time, they had some sort of a keystone club that they formulated, and I became president of that too. I was after leadership, anything leadership related, I dove right into it. And so what happened is, at some point along the way, I was given a scholarship, and it was just a one-week scholarship. It was just a one-week scholarship to the National Association of Jewish Convention. And so at the time, I didn't know what it was, but I thought, cool, they gave me this thing. I get to go to this thing, and they're paying my way, and I'm going for a week, and that sounds really exciting. So I went and I told Agato and some of my friends that I hung out with, and I was like, hey Agato, hey Julio, I'm going to the National Association of Jewish Convention, and it's gonna be cool. I'm gonna be gone for a week, and so they started to laugh, and they said, Jewish convention? So wait, are they gonna make you wear those little hats on your head? Are they gonna convert you? Are you gonna come back being Jewish? And I was like, what? And I was like, oh, then I went home that night, I was like, they're gonna make me wear those little hats. And then I didn't know if I'm gonna become Jewish or something. I'm like, I don't know if I wanna go. I'm gonna be like the only kid from the inner city there, and it's gonna be weird, but anyway, I was given a scholarship, so I had to live up to my responsibility. So I actually, told my parents, my mom, and she was excited for me. And I went away for a week to Air, Massachusetts. Yes, there's a town in Massachusetts called Air, and there's lots of little towns in Massachusetts. And so when I got to Air, turns out when I got on the bus, there's a bus that we all got together at. And so when I got on the bus, I actually, I noticed there were kids from everywhere. Of every ethnicity was there. And I thought, that's really interesting. And so there's this one girl on the bus, and I was talking to her for a little bit, and she seemed interested enough. She was very cute, but I didn't really think much of it. And then, we got there, and turns out it was sort of a, back then they call it multiculturalism. It's basically learn about different cultures. And so I learned about Kwanzaa, which is an African way to, when you jump the broom to get married, etc. And I learned about Shabbats from about the Jewish culture. And so it was a cross section of different cultures that you were learning about. And essentially this organization, the National Association of Jewish Convention, essentially got kids and brought them together and helped them to sort of learn about each other's culture, etc. And it was actually quite interesting. And I remember, there was that same girl showed up in my, African-American girl, and she showed up in one of the get-togethers we were having. And she was there, and again, I didn't think anything. I just didn't think anything of it. But then when we got outside, while she was talking to me, she folded her hands together and went like this, and did a complete side flip. And it was like, whoa, did I just see what I just saw? And I go, do that again. And she went whoosh, and flipped again, sideways. And I was blown away by that. Because remember, I was a break dancer, but I've never seen anyone flip to the side like that. And wow, it was love at first sight. I was like, oh my God. So, I was just very enamored by her. And then when we sat, but it's like, how do I make a move? I know I like her. I don't know if she knows I like her, So in one of the get-togethers, when we were there, we actually sat close to each other, and we were talking and interacting with each other, and guys are kind of clueless. I didn't know. And then all of a sudden we were kind of sitting very close to each other, and then all of a sudden I felt her hand like that, just ever so gentle on my hand. And that's all it took. I knew she was interested, and that was my first love. And we fell in love, and it was amazing. Turns out that she lived in the suburbs, and that was about 2.5, 3 hours away from where I live by bus. And so in order to see her, I had to walk to the train station, get on the train, get on one more train, get on a bus, and then her parents would come in, or mom would come and pick me up along with her, and that's how I'd get to see her. And so that was really cool. I felt very honored that parents would pick you up to let you go out with their daughter. It was so strange. And I'd never experienced a family like this before. They're sort of like the Cosby family. And I know by saying the Cosby family, everybody has this thing about Bill Cosby, but I'm just going to tell you about my childhood, which is, again, Bill Cosby. I know the last time I talked about Michael Jackson, I'm not trying to get off tangent here. I'm just telling you about what happened at the time when we were young and the impact that these individuals had on the world and on the country. And at the time, the Cosby Show was very, very huge, and people were running home to watch the Cosby Show. It was the first show that showed African-American professionals. Remember, it was Dr. Cosby and his wife, and they were educated. And so this particular family, my girlfriend's family, the father had a PhD. I had never met anybody who had a PhD, much less a black guy. The mother had a master's degree and was a teacher. The son was a high school, played football, and it was the high school quarterback. And both of the daughters were all scholastic gymnasts, including my girlfriend, who was an all scholastic gymnast. I had never seen anything like that before. It was absolutely impressive to see. The son played the guitar. It was nothing like what we were, any of my friends interact with or anywhere else that I've seen it other than on TV. And so the fact that this family thought highly of me to date their daughter was pretty cool. And so here I was, and so it motivated me. I was being embraced by this family in this other complete world that I had never experienced before. And so, I couldn't wait for the weekend to come so that I could go see my girlfriend. And after a while, I realized that, look, and this is the thing about, let me just tangentially talk for a second. This is the thing about men and boys dating that a lot of parents need to understand. If, like now, I think the culture is changing where the boy does not know what to do as far as dating is concerned. He's terrified of approaching a girl because it might be considered sexual harassment. If he gives her a compliment, it's considered to be, like you're sexualizing her, etc. But the point is that if you make it to the point that the boy does not know how to approach a girl and to pick up a girl without bringing a lawyer to get the okay sign-off note, then what will happen is that you're going to get a boy that's not very motivated. The other day I went shopping and I noticed this kid in Walmart, and he literally showed up, looked like he rolled out of bed, looked like he didn't brush his teeth. He looked disheveled. He looked like he still had on his pajamas out there, and he didn't give a shit about how he looked. Do you know why partially that is? My personal opinion, it's because there's no motivator beyond themselves. When I was growing up, there was either the church, and so you got dressed to go to church, so you would learn how to get dressed to go to church and how to dress formally. You would at least have some dress slacks you could wear, and some dress shoes, so that if there's ever a formal event, you would at least have an outfit you could wear. You could take a girl out on a date without wearing your sneakers and looking, essentially dressed down, because not all situation you need to dress down. Sometimes you need to take your girl out to somewhere nice, out to dinner, etc., and you want to look nice. And so, when I met my girlfriend, the job was, hey, I was going to impress her. So, I was feeling kind of bad that her parents was coming to pick me up, and sometime her brother would drive. He was a lot of fun. He was a really nice guy, but still, it bothered me that they had to drive out to pick me up at the bus station. So I was working at Grossman's at the time, which is like I said in the past, it's like Home Depot before there was a Home Depot. It's a building and construction business. And so I just started putting in more hours in there because I was dressing nicely because I was clubbing, but I didn't have a car. So I saved up and saved up and saved up until I could buy my first car. And my first car was a Chevy Nova. It was green. The back of it was kind of souped up, so it had big tires in the back and smaller tires in the front. It was cool looking, didn't have any rust on it. But like my brother Michael would say, he looked at it and he opened the hood and he started laughing. He says, your engine got a chain holding up the engine. In other words, he's like, if that chain break, that engine might fall out. You know, brothers and your friend are gonna pick on anything that you do. And that's another thing. All of us, like when we started clubbing, Tito had a lot of clothes. And so Agato and myself would go over to Tito's house and we'd get dressed to go to the nightclub. And if any of us look really, what we call it, whack at the time, which is the saying, you look whacked, man, then, or that's whack, was the saying, then, we'd look at each other and go, man, look at your hair. Your hair looks fucked up. So the thing is, today they call that bullying. Back then, it was helping to motivate you to change, to fit in, to become a better dresser, for us to criticize each other, to look at each other. Women may think only girls sit around and get dressed together, but guys, we sat around trying to figure out how we're gonna dress so we can look good to impress the ladies. Okay, and so, all of us, because Tito had so many clothes, we all wore his damn clothes. It's really kind of cool. And so when it came to the car situation, now I had a ride and I was able to drive out to see my new girlfriend out there and experienced a lot. And one of the things, just by being in that environment and seeing a professional family, essentially, this is sort of the way, the aspiration of what a family could look like when there's a mom and dad and they're well accomplished. Not to say that there aren't different look of success in the African American community, but it was certainly one of the benchmarks to aspire to be. And one of the things, I think her father, he liked me because I remember him driving all the way out to Boston to meet my mom. He never met her. I wasn't home that day. I think we had all left. But just the fact that maybe he was curious to go, who the hell is this kid? But he liked me well enough. He wasn't going to let me, if I kissed his daughter once in front of him and he didn't like it too much and said something to me. So it's not like he was like, go on with my daughter. But he was respectable. And, they'd take us to the movies, they'd drop us off at dinner because mom was the chaperone, or sometime our brother would be the chaperone. And so, it was really just a very, very impactful experience as to something that I can aspire to do. And I remember after that I started working out more. And I remember one day, again, my personality at this point. Anytime there's something that I'm interested in doing, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to work out for 5 hours in the gym. And so, again, I wouldn't work out quite for 5 hours lifting weights, but you'd go into the gym and, I'd start following along whatever the other kids were doing. And I started off bench pressing. At the time, we didn't work on legs. It was more upper body that we worked on, work on your arm, work on your chest, work on your back. We didn't work on shoulders either for several years until my friend Joe pointed out that, we should work on our shoulders too. Because eventually we started laughing at each other. We would go back, no chest, no leg. In other words, you didn't work on your legs. You have skinny legs. You don't work on your chest, etc. You're just going to look not in symmetry, so to speak. Your symmetry is going to look wrong. So eventually we started to work out and having a much more balanced physique. But I remember at the time, in the very, very early stages, I'd work my way up, day after day, 5 days a week, coming into the gym. And I'd finally got up to 135-pound bench press. And I was so proud. 135. Now, 135, for those who don't know, is the big 45-pound bar and then a 45-pound plate. Those are the big plates on each side. Each of those are 45 pounds. And so I was so excited. I was like, 135 pounds. I got the 45 pounds up. And I remember this one kid walked into the gym, and it was an African-American kid, and he was a really cool kid, and he had a lot of friends. And by the way, one of the things you have to keep in mind is that I was a little bit of an outsider because some of the kids, even though I had a lot of friends, there's some groups that you can't be a part of every clique. And so this kid had grew up in the neighborhood, and so he had his own friends, and so he was cool among his friends. He had earn his respect and his props among his friends. And so when he came in there, he was a pretty cool kid, and he looked at me, and he was bigger than I was, because I think by the time I finished breakdancing, I was 135 pounds. So I was not some sort of big kid, but I was lean and ripped at that point from dancing. But this, and so this kid came in there, and you can tell he had a little bit more size on him, and he came in and he slapped on the 45 pounds on each side, and then he put on 25 pounds on each side. So he was basically doing 175. And then he bench pressed it once, and then he looked at me and he just laughed to his friends, and they walked out of there. And that didn't go over well with me. And I was a little pissed off because, I'm embarrassed. It's his job to, take a swipe at me because, hey, it's essentially, it's sort of like it's a pecking order. It's you see in the Serengeti, they're different alpha males, and he's an alpha, and I want to be an alpha. I'm an alpha in my own circle, but at the same token, hey, that wasn't going his way. So that didn't go over well. So for the next several months, I trained and trained and trained. And of course, you can see me over time training until one day, this is much later in the future, I got to, I think I was a junior in high school by then. I bench pressed 3 45-pound plates on each side. That's 315 pounds. And oh my God, that's, when I bench pressed 315 pounds, I felt like I was about 148 pounds at the time. I felt like I was the strongest, biggest guy in the world. I took my shirt off and I walked down Commonwealth Avenue, shirtless, walking down the street, still skinny legs, and walking down Commonwealth Avenue. And, I just felt so big and strong, at the time. And honestly, at 148 pounds, I was ripped, I think I started working on my legs, but they were kind of lagging behind a little bit, so it wasn't terrible, but it certainly, I was still wearing long pants. And the funny thing about it is a lot of the guys didn't wear shorts because we're kind of concerned about our skinny legs. So rather than actually working on your damn skinny legs, we decided, hey, we're just going to wear long pants to cover it up, okay? And so for the longest time, I didn't work legs that much, so I had skinny legs, but I really had a really chiseled, strong upper body. And so that's what I did. I walked down Commonwealth Avenue and, showing off to my friends, which they thought it was pretty cool. I remember one day that this guy came into the gym, and at that point I'd started to, kind of squat more and doing other, started working on my legs, etc. And this older guy came in there, and he was kind of weird. He would come in there, and it's an older white guy that was, he'd come in, and he'd have this cardboard box with him. I think all the guys are gonna remember this weird guy that would come in with a cardboard box, and he'd always have oranges in there, like a few oranges in there that he would bring in there, and he would come into the gym and he would work out. He had a big pot belly, but he'd come into the gym to work out. And one day, he said, you're a strong kid. You should compete. And I was like, compete? I didn't think I was that strong. And he's like, no, I think you should compete. And so, even though he was a little weird, I thought, I'll give it a roll. And so actually, I started competing in bench pressing, and I remember going to a bench press competition meet, and after going through it, I was hooked. I want to add in a couple of things, by the way. At some point, once I started working out, there's another kid that I met, Mauricio. Mauricio was an Hispanic kid who we just hit it off together. We were in the gym. He was ripped. He was strong, and Mauricio was fierce. He was, and we just hung out together. We worked out together. We hung out afterwards. together. And we were the best of friends for the longest time. I think we had a lot in common. We came from a sort of an immigrant family. And, you know, I think he had a troubled home at one point. And so I think he was just angry. And so Mauricio would get in fights all the time. I mean, it was just, you know, and even I remember one day, finally, later on, you know, down the road at the boys club, he and I went outside, and he was a good fighter. The boy could fight. Okay, so it wasn't a pushover. And so, you know, we went out there, we looked at each other in the eye, you know, about to get in a fight, because that's what boys do. We get in fights with each other, then we become friends. But at that point, we kind of looked at each other, and we really didn't want to fight each other. And besides, it wouldn't have ended well, because both of us at that point could fight, and we probably would have beaten the living shit out of each other. So we just decided, not a good idea. So we just continued our friendship. And I remember this one moment that he and I and a couple of other young kids, we would always, after we do our workout at the boys club, we would go down to Burger King. There was a Burger King right down the street. And we'd get there and we would order a Whopper with double Whopper with cheese, large fries, chocolate shake, and an onion ring, or a Pepsi. And so, you know, that's what we'd eat. So you'd eat all this caloric stuff. You may say it's not healthy for you, but here's what I'll tell you. Back then, when you're walking everywhere and you're running all over the place and you're working out and you're young, your metabolism is raging fast. Trust me, you can't gain weight that easily because you're just too active. And so we'd go down there and wolf down double Whopper with cheese, large fries, chocolate shake, onion ring, and a Pepsi. And boom, every day we'd go down there and do it after we finished working out. And then I remember one day in particular that Mauricio we were on our way down there, and there was probably about maybe a couple other kids there. And Mauricio was just goofing off, and he was chasing after one of the kids. So he was up sort of on a higher level up there. It's like you're walking down the street, and there's a wall there. So he was walking on the wall, and then he was chasing after one of the kids, and they were goofing off. And then this guy in this car pulled up, and he was the windows were a little bit tinted, and he pulled up right next to me, and he was a really weird guy. And he goes, "Hey, come here." And I was like, "What?" He goes, "Come here." And I was like, I said, "What do you want?" And he was an older guy, like, he looked like he was in his 40s. And I said, "What do you want?" He goes, "Get your friend to come over there." I go, "What?" He goes, "I want to suck him off." And I go, "What?" I go, "Get the fuck out of here, motherfucker." And I started screaming, and he drove away. What's interesting about that story is that of all the kids in the neighborhood, I don't know if I've ever even told Mauricio this story, but of all the kids in that neighborhood, the impish part of my brain said, you probably should, if he had ever picked up Mauricio and threw him in that car, he'd be like a fucking Tasmanian devil in that car. Mauricio was like my brother Wayne, fearless, and would fuck that, I guarantee you, because this was not like we were 15. Mauricio was, I think we were pushing 17, and we were strong, and we were fit, and unless this guy had a gun or some sort of a drug, I think Mauricio would have beat the living shit out of that guy. So very twisted humor, I thought, I wonder if Mauricio should have gotten in that car. But anyway, so that I digress about that. So that was that story. At that time, there were a lot of, there's some weird people, but that was my first encounter with that kind of crazy person. And weird. It never happened again. I think it may have happened one other time years later. I was on my way down to Grossman's to go to work, and some guy came up and did the same thing. But other than that, we never heard about anything like that again. And so that is the stories that I remember about that. But also back in high school, I was getting more and more actively involved in the the student leadership. And so, we would, after school, I'd stay back after school each day so I could learn more about student leadership. I would get awards. I kept on getting awards for a whole bunch of things. But what was really interesting about that is I found that school was not as challenging to me. I played this game of 10 seconds or 30 seconds before a test. And I remember going into my science class and I felt like I wasn't being challenged in there. So I'd play 30 seconds. And what I would do is I'd purposely not study. And when I got to class, I'd flip through the book in that moment to see what I could absorb in 30 seconds to spit back out for that test, and I would pass the test. And because how I learn orally. So when I'm in a class with a teacher and the teacher's talking, I'm very engaged and I'm interacting and I'm downloading what they're saying to me. So that's how I would learn. So I wouldn't study. I would just go into the classroom, sit, listen very carefully, and then maybe a few minutes before the exam, I would do 30 seconds, and then it was just a game to say, hey, I passed. So interestingly enough, many years later, I went back to visit my high school, and I knew the principal, and she thought highly of me, and I thought highly of her too. She was a very good principal, and she said to me, she says, now here's a kid that was not challenged enough, that because he wasn't challenged enough, he got more into the student leadership thing. And up to that point, I never even knew that they had realized that. It's so strange how adults see things that kids don't see. So anyway, I was so actively involved in that and in student leadership. And so, like I said, after school, I'd stay back and I would learn about different student leadership things. And I was the president of the law club. I became president of the law club at some point as well. It wasn't this big thing, but I essentially really gravitated towards those student leadership things. And out of that, I actually got a scholarship, and I was selected to go to England, Scotland, and Scotland. I was essentially, I think it was called Experiment in International Living. And so in Experiment in International Living, they chose one student from every state. I think 2 students from every state. And so I was selected, and another girl was selected from our state. And we were paid for, we went overseas for 6 weeks. And part of it was to live with a family in that country. It was a pretty big deal. It was pretty prestigious to be selected to represent your state. And so at that time I went home and I told my mom about it, and we were very excited about it. So I'll tell you about that on the next episode. As usual, my name is Bruce Wayne. Don't forget, we have lots of workout videos for ladies. We have lots of workout videos for men. We have a full workout program. Make sure you download my EZIE Weight Loss app. It has lots of workouts on there that you can try. There's free coaching, etc. So please check it out. And for God's sakes, like my channel. I could use the help in getting up there. A lot of these other kids are people who have their channel where they have thousands and thousands of people there. I'd like for you to do the same for me and tell your friends and subscribe to my channel and help me to make my way into getting this thing out to the rest of the world. Thank you very much. See you on the next episode.